welcome to the U.S. Center and our event, The Next Industrial Revolution, Sparking a Global Clean Energy Transition. And it's our honor to introduce to the stage United States Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. Video first. Video first. All right.
The steel that we make here in Butler Works is unique. Our electrical steel is the backbone of our electrical grid. Our nation relies upon it. Chances are, if you look at the transformers up on the poles at the end of your street, that's our steel in that pole. This mill has been a really important part of our community and Butler County. It has, for generations, employed people. One of the things that's really neat in here, there's no one job that's the most important job in here. We all work like a community. It's almost like a beehive.
Butler County has a 200-year history of making things and being at the forefront of manufacturing. These are people with grit who really have a work ethic and they have that know-how to get things done.
The Department of Energy has awarded Cleveland-Cliffs Butler Works with $75 million to invest in the induction reheat furnace project at our hot mill. So we will essentially replace two of those high-powered gas furnaces with induction furnaces. An induction reheat furnace uses electricity to heat versus our existing gas-fired furnaces, which will save us a significant amount of processing cost. They do that by improving our yield by roughly 3 to 4%, and that's a significant ROI to our business. We also improve our product quality, and all of this at the same time while we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Those induction reheat furnaces will lead our way to the future to be able to supply the increasing demands on the electrical grid.
As Butler Works adapts new technology, then their workforce is going to need new skills and knowledge. Butler County Community College and Cleveland-Cliffs has a long-standing partnership. We work together very closely, and we provide skill building training for their apprenticeship program. Educating the workforce and providing them with new skills allows them to sustain and build for the future.
I'm really excited about the new furnace that's coming in. That's going to mean more jobs. That's going to mean growth. That's not just growth to this mill itself, but that's going to create a ripple effect of jobs and a really healthy economy. This is a piece of history. This is like the Industrial Revolution, and things are just beginning in this great, big, bright future.
Butler Works represents our past, our present, and our future. If you think about the generations of people that have come through this community, that have worked to make steel right here in our backyard, we are now creating future jobs, the jobs that are evolving as the economy evolves. And that legacy will continue right here in Butler County.
I've lived in this community my whole life. If I have grandchildren or great-grandchildren, they'll say, my grandma was part of that. That chokes me up.
Can you all hear me? Okay. First of all, thank you so much for coming. I really want to talk about this industrial strategy that has been put in place by the Biden-Harris administration. But I also want to acknowledge where we are right now after last week's election. Things are uncertain. We're not sure what's going to happen. But because we are a tough people, I want to remind everybody that, in fact, oh, this is from the Butler. I didn't know this. This is an interesting slide, right? These are just some of the examples of the investments that have come to Pennsylvania as a result of the Biden-Harris Inflation Reduction Act. AK Steel, York Harley-Davidson. This is the bad news, right? Layoffs, plants to close, slumping demand. I mean, you know this if you live in any of these places across America that have lost jobs. Across America, because we have had a history of deindustrialization for the past couple of decades. I say this as the former governor of Michigan, where we lost so many manufacturing jobs. The bad news is reflected from, 1990 on, the loss of jobs, and things are starting to change. In fact, $500 billion have been invested in clean energy in the United States since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This is the Biden-Harris administration's clean... Are you applauding? Who's applauding next door? But yes, you could applaud because the Biden-Harris Inflation Reduction Act is actually working. It is actually working across America. Indeed, so far, $500 billion has been invested. So far. There's so much more to come. There's been a 150% increase in investment in energy communities across America. 900 new or expanded clean energy factories have come. Can you imagine this? I mean, this is before the end of the 10-year cycle of the Inflation Reduction Act. It has made America irresistible for investment. Irresistible. You know, I say this because when I was governor and we saw all of the loss of jobs, in fact, I was governor of Michigan from 2002 to 2010. And in 2002, when I first took office, in 2003, I got a call the first month of my being in office, and it was from our Economic Development Agency. And the Economic Development Agency said, Gov, we got a problem. There's a little tiny community in the middle of Michigan called Greenville, Michigan. Population, about 8,000 people. And they are the home to Electrolux, which is a big refrigerator factory. And that refrigerator factory employs 2,000 people of the 8,000 who lived in the town. So as you can imagine, it's like a one-company town. And that factory is going to go to Mexico. And I'm like, I was a new governor. I'm like, no way, not on my watch. We are going to bring all sorts of incentives to the management of Electrolux to keep them inside of Michigan. And so we did. I brought my whole cabinet. We went to Greenville. We began to negotiate. We put everything we had on the table. We said we would allow them to pay zero taxes for 20 years. The UAW, who represented the workers, said that they would make the greatest amount of concessions they had ever done. They didn't want anyone to know how much they were willing to sacrifice to keep the jobs there. The city, we were going to build them a new factory. And the management of Electrolux took our incentives outside the negotiating room for 17 minutes. And they came back in and they said, wow, this is the most generous any community has ever been in keeping jobs, to try to keep jobs. But there's nothing you can do to compensate for the fact that we can pay $1.57 an hour in Juarez, Mexico. And so we're going. When that announcement was made, it was like a nuclear bomb went off in Little Greenville. And on the month that the last refrigerator came off the assembly line, the employees had a gathering that they called the Last Supper. It was a community wake, really. And it was at Clackle's Orchard Pavilion. I remember it well. I went to the Last Supper, even though I wasn't invited because I had failed as governor to keep their jobs. And as I went in, there were 1,000 people there in the pavilion, all at 8 top tables, eating out of box lunches. There was a band playing sad music. And I went up to the first table, and this guy stands up. He's got a ponytail and tattoos and his baseball cap on backwards. And he says, Gov! And he pulls his 2 daughters next to him. These are my 2 daughters. They are young teenagers. He said, I want you to know that I have worked at this factory for 30 years. I went from high school to factory. I'm 48 years old. And my father worked at this factory. And my grandfather worked at this factory. And all I know, he said, is how to make refrigerators. And then he puts his hand on his chest like this. He says, "So, Gov, tell me, who is ever going to hire me? Who's ever going to hire me?" And that question was asked by everyone in Clackle's Orchard Pavilion that day. And it was asked by everyone in one of the 50,000 factories that were lost in the first 2 decades of this century. 50,000. We saw so many factories leaving. And Joe Biden came in from Scranton, and he felt what was happening across the country. And he said, "We are going to get an industrial strategy for our nation, an industrial strategy that will bring jobs here rather than seeing them go." When I campaigned for governor in Michigan, I used to campaign on, the free trade agreements. NAFTA and CAFTA have given us the shafta. That was my motto. And honestly, we felt that way. This president has felt that as well. And I know we're here in an international setting, and we all should be in favor of free trade agreements. And free trade agreements are great if they can be enforced and if everybody's playing by the same rules. But not everybody's playing by the same rules. And it was like, as a governor, bringing a knife to a gunfight to try to keep jobs because we didn't have a federal partner. We had nobody that we could team with. States don't have the resources to compete against countries when they're offering incentives. So when Joe Biden came in and said, "We're going to have an industrial strategy," and by the way, when you used to say the words industrial policy, it would get, people's pants in a knot. But now people understand the importance of having a federal partnership. And as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the CHIPS and Science Act, this is what we're seeing in communities all over Michigan. I want you to notice this is all over the country, This is Michigan. Look at how many factories have been turned on as a result of the incentives embedded in these acts. These are just a factory. These are just manufacturing. This doesn't even talk about the solar development projects, et cetera, which we'll talk about with Abby Hopper in a minute. It is happening all across the country. So I tell you, this has been an amazing, amazing period of time for us. In Pennsylvania, this is what it looks like now. You got batteries, decarbonization, electric vehicles, heat pumps, a lot of them in places where those previous bad news stories came from. In fact, Butler Works, as I say, is going to get $75 million. You just saw the video on that. $1.7 billion toward EVs, including that Harley-Davidson plant that I just had the headline for. Leedsdale plant reopens for solar equipment production. Volvo Mack Trucks receives $208 million from the Inflation Reduction Act. International Recycling Group buys 25 acres. A Spark battery maker. These are all next generation kinds of jobs in this clean energy economy. This clean energy economy, by the way, globally will be $23 trillion by 2030. $23 trillion. So we can decide as a nation, we'll just let things go and let other countries take up that and have that opportunity, or we can get in the game. And that's what we've done. And so it is why this investing in America is so exciting. I will say this. It has been 400,000 jobs that have been created so far. 400,000 in the clean energy space alone. That is amazing. This year, we will add 60 gigawatts of clean energy to our electricity grid, on the way to getting to 100% clean grid by 2035 and net zero by 2050. We will have reduced, because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we will have reduced CO2 emissions by 2030, just those two laws, by 40%. And then the private sector and subnational organizations, we hope will get us to our NDC by 2030 as well. So we feel like this is exhibit A of how policy, all you policy nerds out there, how policy can actually work to bring jobs and investment. And all of those dots, 80% of the investment is going to red states or red counties. So many of you wonder, is this durable? Will this be undone? Well, we have gotten letters from Congress, 18 members who are saying, please don't undo that. Actually, that's us and to the next administration. Please don't undo the Inflation Reduction Act because of all of the investment that's happening in those counties. Similarly, we have seen of the counties that have gotten investment, over 80% are from counties that have below average weekly wages. 86% are from counties that have below average college degree rates, college graduation rates. These are going to rural counties. They're going to counties that have been hurting. We are healing the world in our way in the United States because of these two laws. And so I have great hope. I have great hope about the durability of them, number one, because of where these investments are landing and because of the opportunities that it's giving in communities across the country. I have hope because the technologies that are being furthered by these laws include technologies that have bipartisan support, like nuclear, advanced nuclear, huge bipartisan support for those investments, like geothermal, advanced geothermal, or hydroelectric power, or in many ways, critical minerals as well. The Republicans and Democrats have stepped forward and said we have to not cede this territory to China, that we've got to have the ability to extract and process critical minerals in the United States. And so these laws have given us the chance to be able to do that. We have funded companies that are doing extraction and processing of critical minerals, both for batteries for electric vehicle, for solar. We want to be helping the world to diversify and not just relying on one source. So that's why I have great hope for the durability of these bills that have been passed. Maybe not every piece will remain, but I think in large measure they will remain because they are creating jobs. And the third reason why I have hope for the future, that this movement will continue not just in the United States but around the globe, is because it's not just about who's in the White House. It's not just about one administration. It's not about one president. It is about all of us together who are insisting that we must move forward to heal our planet. It is, sometimes I often say that when you're in the middle of history, sometimes it's hard to tell because you're in the middle of it. This past 4 years has been history making. We have never seen this kind of boldness with respect to clean energy development in our nation and inspiring other countries to do the same. So other countries are going to step up. You know, Aristotle once said that nature abhors a vacuum. Others will fill the void of leadership from the Oval Office because it is an inexorable movement. So it has been the privilege of a lifetime to be Secretary of Energy during this incredible period of history. I know for my team, it has been just such an honor to be able to work at this moment with so many tools to be able to save communities across the country and to save our planet. And one of the partners that we have been so lucky to work with is Abby Hopper from the Solar Energy Industry Association, who's been right at the forefront of all of the solar development. The incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act are kind of insane. Not only is it the production tax credit and the investment tax credit, but there's also additional tax credits to locate solar projects. For example, if you have a solar project and you are looking to locate in a low-income community, you get extra. So you may get a 30% tax credit. You get an extra 10% if you locate there. If you use, if you have high labor standards, you get another 10% tax credit. If you use American content, which of course incentivizes the building of solar panels in the United States, it's another 10%. You get a 50% tax credit to be able to build out your projects in communities that really need the work and the example. So it is a privilege to invite to the stage Abby Hopper, who has been overseeing all of this build out. And so glad. Please give her a warm welcome. So tell me, Abby, what, from your perspective, because you've seen it all and you've been there from the start and before, what are you seeing from the perspective of incentives embedded in the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law? What's been the impact from your perch?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. And I think we all owe you a debt of gratitude, you and your entire team, for all of the work you've done. So please join me in thanking you. Transformational. There's no other way to describe it other than transformational. And I loved what you said about sort of the industrial policy. You know, nobody talked about that before, but that's what we have. We have a vision, right? And we have the tools to execute it. And so when I look out at my membership, which is the solar and storage industry in the United States, they are building, right? They are building in those counties that you're talking about. They are building factories. And a lot of people think about solar modules, right? The thing that you see when you're driving down the street in your neighbor's house, maybe hopefully your house, but it's also in the big deserts, and it's also the transformers, and it's also the racking systems, and it's also the trackers. So all of those things, and then all of the storage capacity. So that's happening. We have quadrupled our solar module manufacturing capacity. We went from a country that imported almost exclusively to, by next year, we should be able to self-supply our solar manufacturing.
Which is amazing when you consider that China had really had big-footed this industry as part of their strategic plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is transformed. We were number 7 in the world. We're number 3 now in terms of solar module manufacturing. And to be able to rely on ourselves, right? Energy security and sort of national security as very bipartisan concerns. We're solving it, right? We are addressing these things. So I can't talk enough.
If I'm not mistaken, we've seen like a 6,000% increase in the manufacturing of solar panels since the start of these, since the adoption of these acts.
Absolutely. And 2 years. We're talking 2 years, right? And it's 10 years, as you said.
All right. So a lot of the strategy, right, has been, we've had, you know, investment in supply side, right, to build out the panels and to build out the electric vehicles and all of that. So we've invested in the supply chains and all that. But we've also invested in the demand side, meaning that you get tax credits, right, if you put solar panels on your roof. Say a word about, I'm standing up because I can't see people when I'm sitting down back there. They're trying to see. Anyway, say a word about that.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
Oh, wait, we got your slide up here.
Oh, we do. Isn't that beautiful? It's so beautiful. It looks at, you know, where is all of this happening? And as you said, this is not a right coast, left coast thing. This is not blue and green. This is...
We got to work on these guys.
Yeah, those guys, that could be our next project. But that is an incredible testament to what's happening. So as you said, we are creating demand side incentives as well. So tax credits for companies, tax credits for homeowners, tax credits for utilities, sort of anyone who wants to go solar. And you highlighted a really critical element, right? Which is if you put them, especially on the residential side in low income communities, on native lands and some other areas, there's additional tax credit. And so we grew from 22 to 23. Solar deployment grew 52% in the United States.
Amazing.
What kind of industry is growing 52, 53% year over year? It's a pretty amazing place to be, and it's because of the certainty, right? At the end of the day, these are all people making rational business decisions, right? Homeowners making decisions about how to, that is worth it, I agree. That is homeowners making decisions about how to save on their electricity costs, companies making decisions about how to, like that company you highlighted, how to save on their bottom line, utilities providing lower costs to their ratepayers.
So there's a lot of components to a solar panel, and we want to make sure we have the full supply chain, not just for solar, but for all these other technologies in the United States. Are there some success stories about the solar supply chain?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question because there's so much more that goes into it. And as you said, we're just talking about one of the technologies. Obviously, this is a revolution.
About the batteries, too.
Yeah. we can talk about the batteries. So you and I had the privilege of being in Albuquerque, New Mexico together. Think about breaking news. The sun moves during the day, right? So I'm a policy nerd, not a scientist. But I do know the sun moves. And so they're trackers, right? So that the solar panels can track the sun. That is a highly engineered product, right? To figure out the right way and the right method. And we excel at that here in the United States. We've done a lot of R&D. And so we were at a facility in Albuquerque that was breaking ground on new manufacturing capacity for trackers. Similarly, I was at Next Tracker. I know you've been at their events again. I was in Memphis, right? Memphis, Tennessee, at a facility that had whole lines that had been shut down for a long time. And they were bringing up lines to produce steel and produce the trackers. Those are just like a teeny tiny bit of the examples.
So we still know that it's cheap to manufacture in other countries, and we have this urgency of wanting to build out solar deployment on the one hand, and there's a bit of tension, is there not, between trying to get all of that building here and maybe the additional cost for building in the United States. How does your association, or how do you see that tension working, especially with all of the talk about tariffs, et cetera?
Right. Well, you identified the tension, right? Sort of this, how do we go quickly and as inexpensively and as domestically manufactured as possible? The Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law have done a lot to deal with that cost delta. And as like most things, the more we build in the United States, the cheaper we're getting just because of improvements in process. And it's partly why we're here, right, is to look at where are there other great trading partners, right? Maybe some who are really good at one part of the supply chain, who share our values, who share our commitment to environmental law, who share our commitment to human conditions. And so how do we partner with them as well, those countries and those companies, so that maybe it's something that we are a little slower on the uptake, we can source from that sort of country.
So there's been a phase-in of some things to allow the solar panel factories to be built. You could still, at that point, get a little bit from overseas, but we're ramping up to fully a domestic, if people want to take advantage of the tax credits, right?
We did a study before the IRA was passed, right? Obviously, we have desired to have a domestic manufacturing capacity in the United States, but it wasn't until the IRA passed that we could actually do it. We tried tariffs for a long time. All those did was what you said, increase costs without increasing domestic supply. So we did a roadmap. Like, what is it going to take to build a domestic supply chain in the United States, both batteries and solar? And it's happening just like we thought it would, right? We start at the most finished product, the modules, and we move on to the cells, and then we move on to the ingots and wafers. I'm just talking about the panel you see on the roof, right? And it's happening. It's happening. Like, the thing I love about what we're doing is it's no longer a theory, right? We're no longer talking about what could be and what might be, but we're talking about what is, right? And that I share your optimism about the durability.
I was just going to ask you about that. You do? I'm just wondering, can you say a word about what you see? I mean, I'm assuming the association has relationships with obviously both sides of the aisle, and you feel like you've got strong enough support on the Republican side of the aisle that this will have durability.
Yeah, I do. Bottom line, I do think that this has durability, and for all of the reasons you identified, which is that we are creating infrastructure, investment, tax base, and jobs in districts that are mostly represented by Republicans. And that's okay, right? Like, that's okay. That's good. As you said, we are healing a people and healing a nation and healing a planet. So yes, there's a lot of political reasons why I think that's the case, which you and I could talk about all day. But I think fundamentally it is because people are experiencing the benefits in a very personal way.
And I think there's on both sides of the aisle, but particularly on the Republican side of the aisle, people have been supportive of an all of the above energy strategy. And of course, all of the above includes solar. All right, last question. It's kind of a compound. Greatest challenges and greatest opportunities.
Yes. So I'll start with the challenge first. It's always good to end on a positive note. I think the greatest challenge we have is because of our success, So many of the systems we have are just not built for this rapid transformation, right? So think about transmission permitting, think about interconnection queues, even workforce, right? We need more and more humans, more and more people to work. So those are challenges because those can absolutely slow down this rapid transformation that we so desperately need. I think the biggest opportunity is this has been the best soul healing moment these last few days here because it reminds me, as you said, that there is a whole world committed to making this happen. My heart needed that. But I think in the United States, there is just so much demand. I mean, think about what customers are saying, right? Don't think about how they are registered to vote. Customers want reliable, affordable, clean energy. That's what they want. They tell us that, corporates, residential, utilities, and we can deliver it. So I think it's going to continue strong.
All right. Well, I know that as a former Michigan governor, I'm going to quote Henry Ford, who said that remember when times are tough, that airplanes take off into the wind. And it is true that only challenge provides the opportunity for greatness. So we're at this moment. There are challenges, but look at all the greatness in this room. Thank you all so much for coming. All right. Appreciate you so much. Thank you. All right.
We loved having you join us at the U.S. Center. Please remember to return your headsets as you leave. Welcome to the U.S. Center. Our event will start soon. Welcome to the U.S. Center. Our event will start soon. Welcome to the U.S. Center. If you are hearing this, congratulations, your headset is working properly. To adjust the sound on your headsets, use the volume rocker on the side near the power button.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here with Senators Markey and Whitehouse here at the U.S. Center for what has been a very exciting day of programming and several days of programming to come. My name's Jesse, and I am the Chief of Staff at the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate's office at the State Department. Generally speaking, if you know anything about climate and energy in the U.S. Congress, you know both of these gentlemen, and they need very little introduction. By way of brief anecdote, I worked for Senator Chris Murphy for the better part of 9 years, and when he got elected in 2012, I was his environmental staffer, and we went to a bunch of the environmental NGOs, and he asked, what can I do to stand out on climate policy in the Senate? And their answer literally was, do whatever Sheldon Whitehouse is doing and do more of it. And the only reason they didn't mention Senator Markey is because he wasn't quite a senator yet at that point. These guys have devoted decades of service to championing this problem and the solutions to it in thick and in thin, in good times and in lean times. So I'm going to stop talking. I will turn things over to Senator Whitehouse for a couple minutes of framing remarks, then Senator Markey, and then we'll engage in some back and forth. Senator Whitehouse, the floor is yours.
Thank you all for being here. I view our overall position in the United States on climate as having taken a very significant punch in the election, that the Trump administration will essentially be the glove through which the hand of the fossil fuel industry operates, and that is not a good turn of events. But something not being a good turn of events does not at all mean it is a lethal turn of events, because there are plenty of other factors that are going to come into play. One, I think, is going to be a much more energetic role among the states. And if you just look at California, it is the 5th largest economy in the world. And New York is the 10th largest economy in the world. And Rhode Island and Massachusetts already work together on our RGGI in New England, and together with California on the national fuel standards. So there's a lot of established capability for states to stand up an alternative to the Trump administration's defection on these issues. So that would be point one. Yeah, let's be optimistic. Point two is that the climate conversation is entering a third phase. The first phase was climate science. And I was in on that phase early because I'm married to a marine scientist. So I was getting it bang, bang, bang at the breakfast table from early on. And after a while, it moved from science to politics. Went from climate science to climate politics. In the early days, that looked pretty good. In the Senate, we had 3 really robust climate bills kicking around in 07, 08, and 09. And in 08, the Republicans put forward a presidential candidate in John McCain who had a totally respectable climate platform. January 2010 killed all of that because January 2010 brought the Citizens United decision, which gave the fossil fuel industry unlimited secret spending power, and they put that immediately to work to kill bipartisanship on climate, and they did. So the science phase, bravo scientists, they all did their job. The political phase, some of us tried, but the fossil fuel industry intervened and killed it with unprecedented campaigns of influence and propaganda and corruption. Now we're entering phase 3, which is climate as an economic force. And we're seeing that in a couple of ways. We're seeing that through every fiduciary in America having to tell the truth about climate or be liable for harms. Whether it is a CEO or a board of directors or an investment advisor or a stockbroker, they have to make decisions under fiduciary liability, and they've got to treat this right. And that's, people used to talk about 1,000 points of light. That's hundreds of thousands of points of light. More unpleasantly, look at Florida. In Florida, the home insurance market has fallen apart. Rates have quadrupled, companies have gone bankrupt, companies have left the state. There's a state fund that has had to be propped up. It is in real trouble. And what was predicted years ago by the chief economist for Freddie Mac, the mortgage giant, is starting to come true, which is that the uncertainties created by climate, the added risks created by climate, will create chaos in the insurance markets. And as the insurance markets start to fail, right behind them come the mortgage markets, because no insurance, no mortgage. Now, if you're a billionaire in Mar-a-Lago, you can wait for the next billionaire to come along and buy your house cash. But if you're a plumber working outside of Orlando and living in a development there, you need a market that can have mortgages if you're going to sell your house. So the cascade was insurance collapse, mortgage collapse, property values collapse. And then what the chief economist for Freddie Mac said was, this will create a nationwide economic shock like the 2008 mortgage meltdown, and on that scale. That was for coastal property values crash. Now, right beside coastal property values crash are the newer evil siblings of North Carolina's internal flooding, inland flooding hit to the insurance markets, and throughout the West, the wildfire risk tearing up insurance markets. So economically, in the next 4 years, all of this is going to get way worse, and it's going to get way worse faster if people aren't paying attention to it. So there are inevitable forces that are going to drive the climate conversation to the top of our priorities. And while this administration may be unwilling to do anything about it, for reasons of having been paid to be unwilling to do anything about it, then there are innumerable other ways, and I'll hand it over to Eddie to talk about his version of some of the added additional ways in which the uprising to solve this problem will come.
So, Sheldon and I, we are eternal optimists. We know that Donald Trump is going to be a blip in climate history. A blip. Just going to come and go. Because climate, COP should just stand for climate over presidents. Okay? It just continues on, and we have to work for the solutions regardless. So here's the good news. Because of the Biden administration and the Inflation Reduction Act, it's unleashed $1 trillion of public sector investment, and potentially another $3 or $4 trillion worth of private sector investment. So far, in just the first 2 years, it's created 400,000 new jobs in the clean energy sector. It's unleashed $376 billion worth of public and private capital. That's the first 2 years. That's why the oil, gas, and coal industry spent so much money to get Donald Trump elected, because they know they're on the wrong side of history. They know that children are going to look in the rearview mirror. They're going to have to go to history books to find out that there ever was such a thing as oil, gas, and coal industries. That's how fast it was moving. Last year, for the first time in global history, more money was invested in solar than oil last year for the first time in the history of the planet. That's what they're afraid of. because that wasn't on the scoreboard 15 years ago. So all of this is happening so fast that they need a president to try to slow it down. Can they slow it down? I don't think so. I think that if you're a Republican in Congress and 80% of the IRA, and it's called the IRA because Joe Manchin didn't want it to be called the greatest climate bill in the history of the world. Okay? He did not want that title on it. So it's 80% of all the money's going into red districts. And Donald Trump's going to ask them to walk the plank in February or March or April of this year and say, I don't want those jobs. Close down those new manufacturing plants. We don't want to be making solar panels in Georgia. We don't want to be making all-electric vehicles in Tennessee or Kentucky. Good luck, Mr. President, trying to convince somebody to give up their career in the United States House of Representatives because you made a promise to somebody from Oklahoma or North Dakota who's in the oil and gas industry. That's not how politics works. Politics is a stimulus response institution, and there's nothing more stimulating than your voters and employees yelling at you to vote for their jobs in the clean energy economy. So from my perspective, it's very encouraging. First of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you for representing the United States. We are the technological giant. In 2009 at Copenhagen, 2,000 total megawatts of solar have been deployed in the United States. 2,000 total all-electric vehicles. 2009 in Copenhagen. Today, there's going to be 37,000 new megawatts of solar deployed this year. Thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you, Inflation Reduction Act. 8,000 new megawatts of wind deployed this year. 45,000 total renewable energy resources. Battery storage technologies making breakthroughs every month, making it more likely that wind and solar has even greater capacity because you can store that electricity when the wind and solar panels have produced that electricity. It can be saved for later on that day or week. It's all happening very rapidly. It's an irreversible technological revolution. And so I'm optimistic. Sheldon and I are going to battle every day on the floor of the Senate with our colleagues in the House, and we're going to battle to save as much of the IRA as we can. We're going to absolutely encourage President Biden to get out as much of the IRA money as he can in the next 2 months into the hands of those companies and individuals who can use it. We're going to urge him to finish all the regulations on all electric vehicles from California and 20 other states that follow them, to any other regulation that they're promulgating to make it Trump-proof so that we continue this great revolution. But without question, it's a different planet because of what has happened in the last 4 years. But the world's not going to turn back, and neither are we. So, as Sheldon said, at the state level, at the city level, the corporate level, but in my own opinion, even inside of the Republican caucuses, they're going to be saying that they cannot turn back. They cannot, in somehow or other, get away with voting to kill industries that are now employing thousands of jobs in their red districts. So I'm an optimist. I think we can make it through the next 4 years, and then we'll be ready for the next great surge with the next great Democratic president and House and Senate. But all of you have helped us to stay in this game and be the leaders. You can't preach temperance from a bar stool. You can't tell other countries to do something if you're not doing it yourself. And we are doing it, and we're going to promise you that we're going to do everything we can in Washington to keep our country in the game. So thank you.
Great. Yes, indeed. Senator Whitehouse, let's start with you. As I think folks know, you've spent the last several years chairing the Senate Budget Committee. and you've used that perch along with some of your team here to probe the panoply of impacts of the climate crisis on financial systems, on people's take-home pay, on infrastructure. Can you give us sort of a risk snapshot of what awaits us if we don't confront this crisis head-on that you've learned in the last couple of years?
Well, I'd be repeating myself if I went back to the insurance crisis, to mortgage crisis, to property values crash, cascade. So I'll just say it because that is probably the most serious risk that we have, and it potentially will propel us into a new, worse than 2008 economic crisis. So that's one. The other is that the fossil fuel industry has done a very good job about first creating inflation, initially after Ukraine was raided by Putin, and then blaming Biden for the inflation that they created. And if you look through a lot of the areas in which families are having to pay a lot more, gas prices went up because of the international cartel, which our American companies chose to follow rather than stay at a market price. The insurance costs around the country are leaping upwards, not just homes, but car insurance as well, because of these climate risks, because of hailstorms and flooding and all of that, fires. And then particularly in the agricultural area, the uncertainty and the damage that droughts and floods are doing are dramatically raising commodity prices in different areas. And then you get a drought shutting down traffic, pinching down, let's be fair, pinching down traffic in the Mississippi River or in the Panama Canal, and you now have added shipping costs for those products as they move about. And supply chain disruption ensues from all of that as people who used to buy a particular good in a particular place can't find it there any longer because it flooded out or droughted out, so they've got to go looking elsewhere. All of that turbulence in grocery store pricing, a lot of it will track back to climate. So we have a very important case to make. One, to head off the insurance to mortgage to property values cascade. And two, is to let people know that their concern about costs is a climate concern. And I think if we can engage with those two things very effectively, those are obvious arguments to make. We just got rolled by the fossil fuel industry propaganda apparatus. They had a plan, they executed on it, we were caught napping, we didn't get back fast enough, all of that. I'll add one thought on the subject of the fossil fuel propaganda apparatus. What we're seeing in the financial community is this fiduciary problem of people having to take climate change seriously because they're obliged to legally. And when that began to show up in different kinds of reporting, the fossil fuel industry responded with this anti-ESG crusade that they cooked up and created. It was as fake as a Broadway show. It just got out of the theater and went loose into the streets. It had actors, it had scripts, it had producers, it had directors. The whole thing was a sham. But again, we got caught short by it and we didn't respond adequately. But that fiduciary pressure is going to continue as well. They have to tell the truth or they violate their fiduciary duties. So there's just a lot of this that is going to move our way.
Senator Markey, you've been to a lot of these meetings over the years. There's a group of senators here, there's a House delegation here, there's a dozen federal agencies here on the ground doing negotiations. What's your message to those folks? How should they think about their role as they move throughout the next couple of days here at the COP? What's your message to the U.S. delegation here, and how do you think the election is going to impact that work?
Ronald Reagan took the solar panels off the roof of the White House because the oil and gas and coal industry asked him to do it. But you know what we did when he named climate deniers, environmental terrorists to be the head of the Department of Energy and the EPA and agency after agency? We just fought. And after 2 years, he gave. He gave because people did not elect Donald Trump to undermine the solar and wind revolution. They didn't elect him to allow for environmental despoliation of environmental justice communities across the United States. He didn't say those words. They didn't elect him on that basis. They might have elected him on immigration. They might have thought inflation was too high, but it was not a blank check to eviscerate the environmental protections that it took 2 generations to put on the books. And if you poll wind and solar and all electric vehicles, it all polls out at 70%. So he's about to put that into play. So my message is this, that it's a marathon, not a sprint. We've come a long way, as I said, from 2,000 all-electric vehicles, 2,000 megawatts of solar in only 15 years. We should be very optimistic that the public will respond to our raised voices when Lee Zeldin is being cross-examined by Sheldon and I in front of our committee as the new head of the EPA, and he's trying to explain why he's voted 40 times to eliminate the tax breaks for wind and solar. It won't look good across the country. Young people are going to be rising up. They're going to be angry. And they're going to be naming a Secretary of Interior who wants to do the same thing on public lands, a Secretary of Energy who wants to end renewables and put oil, gas, and coal out front. It's not going to sell. And it's not what they voted for. They didn't vote to cut Social Security, they didn't vote to cut Medicaid, and they didn't vote to cut and eliminate wind and solar. Okay? And they're heading right towards those things because for Republicans, Newt Gingrich used to have, it was called a contract with America in 1995. Well, with Donald Trump, it's a contract with the country club. And believe me, there's no poor people walking around Mar-a-Lago right now with their agenda. There's no, environmentalists who are allowed through those gates. And once these confirmation hearings start, it's going to be very clear that if we keep our energy level high, if we build the movement, if we do this right, that we'll be making a complete turnaround in just 2 years electorally, but we'll be able to stop wholesale cutting of any of these programs. We're going to be measuring our victories by the size of our defeats. And I believe our defeats are going to be very small in the environmental and clean energy sector. Okay? But that's how we measure victories when you're in the minority. Okay? And we're going to be able to stop them, build for a better day, which is only 2 years, and then grow it exponentially once again in just 2 years. So that's my message to everyone in our delegation, everyone here. You have to have a higher energy level than you probably want to have because we're just hit in a Boston Marathon metaphor, Heartbreak Hill, and people are a little pooped, okay? And you get a couple of months off, and then you got to get back into the race because actually, from a debating perspective, it's going to be all downhill. It's going to be an impossible position that they are standing, trying to defend the unconscionable harm to the environment they're going to propose to the American people. It's going to be disastrous politically for them.
Thank you for that, Senator. Senator Whitehouse, you alluded to this earlier. Following the war in Ukraine, a lot of countries around the world have seen energy prices go up, liquid fuels, electricity. At the same time, there's a lot of folks here and elsewhere that still claim the transition to renewables is too expensive. Those tariffs are just going to be too high. It's going to be socially unacceptable. Sync up those two thoughts with us. How do you feel on that topic?
I think it's becoming increasingly clear that utility-scale solar is the cheapest form of energy one can have. And wind is not far behind it. And the trajectory is still downward. So at this point, clean energy actually wins the price competition. And it wins the price competition without considering what economists love to call negative externalities, the damage that fossil fuels cause. There are a couple of measures. Look at the social cost of carbon calculus that the Biden administration did, $130 per ton. Look at the International Monetary Fund calculation of the subsidy for fossil fuel in the United States, north of $600 billion a year due to polluting for free. Polluting for free. So, first of all, a pollute for free business model has no place morally, and it has no place economically. You can go to Milton Friedman, the most conservative economist, to understand that a negative externality has to be baked into the price of the product in order for there to be an operating market. So this, I think, is a bit of a phantasm. The fossil fuel industry wants to scare people and say, moving to clean energy is going to raise your prices. Actually, what's really going to raise their prices is sticking with fossil fuel. And there's studies that put those differences in the trillions. And not by, like, wild green groups, by Deloitte, the corporate consultancy, for God's sake. The Economist magazine, which runs a little bit to the right of Eddie and me, had a cover article in April that said that the foundations of the largest asset class on the planet, the real estate industry, are being shaken by fossil fuel with potentially $25 trillion in global economic losses. So you just got to cut through some of the fossil fuel fog sometimes and focus people on what the real prices are. And the prices of clean energy are the best. And then when you throw in the cost of fossil fuel to the environment, the negative externalities, it gets better still. And then in the out years where those things start to hit tipping points and go off the charts, you then get into huge, huge differences. Look up the Deloitte report. I think the swing is $220 trillion globally between being responsible on climate and following the fossil fuel industry over the falls.
Senator Markey, driving and accelerating the fossil fuel phase-out is something you've championed for a very long time. Given the election outcome we just had, how should folks think about the momentum of that in the U.S. and in the countries around the world that are gathered here at the COP?
The fossil fuel phase-out.
Yeah.
Well, in Europe, they're projecting a 50% decline in natural gas demand by the year 2030. I didn't say 2050. A 50% decline by the year 2030. At the same time that the natural gas industry in our country wants to build LNG export facilities. So somebody's right and somebody's wrong. But the Europeans are saying, we don't need your LNG. We don't want to be building these import facilities. So, again, as I said earlier, last year there was, for the first time, more money invested internationally in solar than in oil. So it's happening. What they tried to do in this election year was to slow it down, buy a little more time, because they know all they're going to have is stranded assets. They're going to have this stuff under the ground if it picks up, if it continues at the pace at which it is moving right now. And so what they did was they said, as you remember, Donald Trump said at this huge conference, and Harold Hamm, this big natural gas executive, picked him up on it. He said, if you give me $1 billion, I'll end all the subsidies for wind and solar and electric vehicles. I'll do that. That's back in April. Give me $1 billion, pay to play, and I'll kill all those subsidies. And that'll help him get elected. Well, the reason he had to do that was how quickly this transition is taking place. So they're saying, oh, it's socialism to have tax breaks for wind and solar and all electric vehicles, battery storage technologies. It's socialism. Well, what do you call 100 years of tax breaks for oil, gas, and coal industry? All we're saying is give us some of that socialism. Level out the playing field. Make it possible, for the other technologies to be able to compete. Sheldon mentioned Milton Friedman. I'm going to go back to the original Milton Friedman, Adam Smith. Adam Smith is spinning in his grave right now so rapidly that it would actually qualify for a tax break under the Biden renewable energy provisions. But he hated monopolies. Monopolies is the ultimate dirty word in Adam Smith. And that's what Trump is saying. I don't want competition. I hate Darwinian paranoia-inducing competition in the marketplace. I'm going to kill your competition for you, oligopoly. That's what he's promising. And it's not going to wash because you can't stop this inevitable, inexorable decline in fossil fuel consumption, no matter how much you want. And the next generation, the younger generation, the Green New Deal generation, isn't going to buy it as they become the CFOs, as they become the chief energy officer or the chief environmental officer at the firm they're going to get hired with. They're not going to buy it because, as Sheldon just said, the lowest cost producer of electricity in America is going to be renewable energy, especially as the battery technology gets more sophisticated. And it's just trying their best, maybe for 4 more years, to fend off the inevitable.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Whitehouse, you've been one of the Senate's lead champions of legislation to create a carbon price and also institute accompanying trade mechanisms. Why do you think that remains such an incredibly important puzzle piece in the solution set here?
The reason that's such an important puzzle piece is because we've fiddled and dawdled for so long that we've lost innumerable opportunities to forge a pathway to climate safety. I think it's the Potsdam Institute that did the study of 1,200 different peer-reviewed scenarios for climate pathways. Of those 1,200, 11 remain. 11 remain. And there are two things about all 11 of them that we need to recognize. One is that they all take us over 1.5 degrees. So we're going to have to claw back excess carbon. So carbon removal, particularly direct air capture, becomes essential. The biggest is that every single one of them requires a carbon price. There simply are no remaining pathways to climate safety without putting a price on carbon. The economic law of negative externalities, the moral law of cleaning up after yourself, it's all caught up with us now, and we should do the right thing, but we also must do the right thing in order to get on that pathway to climate safety. So if you're looking at what the opportunities are out there for this, the CBAM stands like the North Star, the carbon border adjustment mechanism that the EU and the UK have signed up on. Two things about the CBAM that are worth remembering. The first is that if we sit on our butts in America and do nothing but pay the tariff to the EU and the UK, we are still economic winners because the tariff differential between us and China is so great that jobs and manufacturing and industry will move to the United States. So we're winners if we sit still economically. So it's going to be a hard sell to attack this. Doesn't mean the fossil fuel industry won't do it because they only care about their own profits. So, but, we can have some assurance about this being a good thing for us. Then add in us having our own carbon tariff, expanding the club that is putting a price on carbon internationally, and we'll have a quarrel with the EU over the domestic carbon price component of that. I don't think they should give us a break on the tariff if we don't have a domestic carbon price, because they do. When we did the IRA, Eddie and I went to the last COP, and the Europeans were jumping up and down saying, how could you do such a thing? It's, unfair to trade. And we basically told them, tough bounce, pound sand, do your own, catch up. So they have every right to say to us, we're going to do the CBAM, and if you don't like it, tough bounce, pound sand, do your own, and catch up. And by the way, that race is the race to climate safety. So if there were two things I would want to take out of this COP, one is we've got to stand firm on the CBAM. The EU and the UK cannot budge, whatever pressure the oil and gas industry or Trump might bring to bear on them. And the second is we can now locate methane by satellite. For God's sake, let's make sure when we spot a methane leak, we go and fix it, and we chase down the country where it's happening to make sure they go and fix it. And if we do those two things, just those two things coming out of the COP, I think we stay alive, we keep hope alive for that pathway to climate safety that we owe our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Markey, last question to you, and then we'll give both of you some time for closing reflections. We've talked a lot about costs here, but you've also talked a bit about the benefits to ambitious climate action, especially in terms of jobs. You represent in the United States Senate a very pro-climate state. You're a RGGI state. You've done a lot at the state level. Talk about some of the benefits you've seen there in the region, in New England, in the country that we should be carrying forth as a message here at COP.
Well, it's a massive job creator, first of all. In Massachusetts, we have a place that's called Greentown. It's in Somerville. It's got 150 companies there that are all spin-offs out of Harvard, MIT, just coming up with new technologies, new ideas. One of them, Form Energy, is now going to build 3 separate facilities in West Virginia for battery storage technology, for utility scale. So there's actually going to be more jobs in West Virginia, but we keep those research and development jobs. And we've got hundreds of other companies doing the same thing. So it might wind up with the manufacturing in Georgia or Kentucky or West Virginia, but we wind up with tens of thousands of new jobs in Massachusetts as a result of that development, right? So it's a national economic plan to create millions of new jobs in this new economy sector, in the same way that we move from a black rotary dial phone to a flip phone to a computer in everyone's pockets in 20 years. No one wants to go back to a black rotary dial phone with a cord that's only 6 feet long that your mother and father can hear everything you're saying when you're in the living room, okay? No one's going back. Well, the same revolution's unfolding in energy, in transportation. It's happening. And it gives this younger generation that took on the telecommunications revolution, the Google, eBay, Amazon, Hulu, YouTube revolution. Well, this whole younger generation wants to do the same thing in clean energy. They're ready to go. That's where they want to work. That's their ambition. And if we got out of the way, they'd get it done in 10 years. It would be all over, this revolution. So that's going to be our challenge. It's to allow these young, talented people all across the country to not only invent, but then let union workers, let the roofers with solar, let the electricians, let all of these building trades people go out there and install it in our country. You know, Thomas Alva Edison right now would recognize our electricity grid in the same way 25 years ago Alexander Graham Bell would have recognized our telephone network. Alexander Graham Bell would have no idea what we're doing any longer. And the same thing should be true for Thomas Edison in another 10 or 15 years if we do this right. To have a smart grid, to have one that's pulling in the wind off the ocean, the solar off of roofs, off of deserts, and transporting it into the transportation, into the population areas of our country. So we can do this, but we have to have the same kind of optimism that was generated when we just had this information revolution that we just went through. So I would just be optimistic. I would just say young people want to do this. We have to trust young people. They're going to be living with the consequences if we don't act. And if we got out of the way, they will lead us. They will lead us. We should listen to them. We should be optimistic about the future. We should trust them to be able to make the difference that's not only going to save our country, but save the world. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets. We have to engage in the preventative care, and the young people of our nation and the world are ready to go. You can feel it walking around this COP. So thank you all so much for everything that you're doing.
So we have a couple moments left. Senator Whitehouse, what else should folks know that we haven't covered here yet?
I would add one additional point about the CBAM and about border tariffs. There is a legitimate concern about the harm that the developed world has done to the developing world with our carbon pollution, and about our responsibility to make amends and try to solve that problem. I would say two things about that. One, the long conversation we've had in which it's government's responsibility to do that with no responsibility on the fossil fuel industry stuns me. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that our hosts here in Azerbaijan, in their greeting letter, suggested a role for the fossil fuel industry to contribute to loss and damage funds. About time. Thank you. And the CFAF is being developed, and that will help there. But my other point is that I don't think, need to fear the CBAM on this. The worst economic and environmental injustice that we could do to the developing world would be to fail on climate. Because we can take care of ourselves in the developed world. They're the ones for whom this is going to be a brutal punch in the face. Completely dislocating. So rule 1, point 1, the star we have to steer towards is get those damned emissions down and solve the underlying problem. And then we look at where the CBAM will actually help developing nations. Because if in fact it unleashes an enormous new investment in clean technology as India and China and Russia and other countries that are exporting have to fight to try to suddenly get their emissions down, and they want to go to places where there's sun and wind and buy from them offset, I mean, there's no reason that the Sahel couldn't be the Permian Basin of sun and wind for Europe and for a developing African continent. There are truly, I think, extremely positive outcomes for the developed world that can come from the outcome of a CBAM. So we need to be very alert to make sure we are doing our moral and economic and environmental duty by those countries and people for whom that is not true. But to throw out the CBAM would create a far, far, far worse injury to all. And when we focus down on what countries actually need what and put those loss and damage funds to their best and most detailed and specific use, I think that becomes a very solvable problem. But it's not a solvable problem in a world where it's falling off and no amount of loss and damage payments can make things whole for the amount of physical damage and climate damage that has been done.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Markey, you have the last word.
I just say, just following up what Sheldon said, the climate crisis requires a response that is equal to the civil rights movement of the 1960s in the United States. It has a responsibility to unleash the same technological response as President Kennedy's moonshot in the 1960s in response to the Soviet Union. It is the economic, environmental, and moral issue of all time. And we, as a country, have sent 25% of all of the CO2 historically up into the atmosphere. 25% is red, white, and blue. And as we walk around here, we can see all of these people from all of these countries who are going to suffer the consequences of the great wealth that we created while we polluted this atmosphere. And we have a responsibility to those countries. It's a moral responsibility. And we can't discharge that responsibility unless we act. And so if you kick Donald Trump in the heart, you break your toe. It's all about just making money. And that's his bottom line on everything. But for us, we have environmental sacrifice wards in major cities all across the country. The IRA says 40% of all of the money must go to climate justice communities. Well, all around the world, there are islands. There are poor countries who are environmental sacrifice countries. And we have an obligation to them as well. And whether it be the World Bank or the IMF, Exim Bank, or the treasuries of our countries that benefited from it, we have a moral responsibility to make sure that we protect them from the harm that was created while we were getting wealthy, even as we protect those people in our own country who live in those areas where they have suffered from that industrialization as well. So we thank all of you for being here, and we know that the United States is still going to stay all in. It's a marathon. Please don't give up. Get your energy level high. You can have a break during Thanksgiving and Christmas, then get ready next year to fight. Fight for the planet and fight for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators.
We loved having you join us at the U.S. Center. Please remember to return your headsets as you leave. Thank you for coming to the U.S. Center. We are now closed for lunch. Welcome to the U.S. Center. Our event will start soon. Welcome to the U.S. Center. If you are hearing this, congratulations. Your headset is working properly. To adjust the sound on your headsets, use the volume rocker on the side near the power button.
Good afternoon. Hi, I am Heather Reams, and I am President of Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions, an organization based in Washington, D.C. that advocates for clean energy policy and climate policy. This is our fourth COP that we've attended, and each year we strive to help communicate and demonstrate that Republicans in the United States care about climate change and have the tools to combat through pragmatic policy and keep costs in check while reducing emissions. I'm proud today to say we have a bipartisan panel to show where there's common ground. And we're going to be talking about nuclear here today. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for traveling for so far away for a short period of time. It's an important place to be, so thank you for making the time. You guys are awake enough to do this?
Of course. I hope so. I hope everybody understands that we got on a flight yesterday after votes, flew here, and drove straight from the airport to be here. So there might be a little jet lag going on. I'm just saying.
Okay, no falling asleep. I'll keep you all wide awake. How about that? Well, thank you again for traveling here. It's important that you're here. And this is an official delegation from the Energy and Commerce Committee that you are on traveling. So I just wanted to ask, how many members have come over with you?
We have seven members. We have two members of the Democrat side and five members of the Republican side. But here, it's really refreshing. We're on the same side. We're all Americans, and we all want to make America prosper and our allies as well.
Here.
Well, Congressman Peters, I remember last year we were on a panel. I think it was during it was a nuclear panel, if I recall. And you were saying you were outnumbered as a Democrat, and there were two Republicans flanking you. You're back.
Isn't that great? I think it's good. I like the ratio. like the ratio. No, it's good. I think. Look. I've been engaged through 5 COPs through two administrations. We're coming on a third administration during which I've been attending, and I just want people to know that the United States is here to be as part of this conversation and to show our leadership.
Any other comments before I start in my questions? Okay, let's go. Congressman Griffith, I'm going to start with you. Right to my left. Recent advancements in the nuclear industry are making the delivery of carbon-free nuclear energy faster, easier, and safer than ever before. Can you comment on these new technologies like small modular reactors known as SMRs? What they mean for the industry, what Congress / the federal government can do to ensure America is leading.
Well, I think Congress does have a role. Now, I'm excited about the new technology. I'm excited about SMRs. I do want to get this in, then I'll throw my notes away and just go off the cuff. But on the Energy and Commerce Committee this Congress, I was proud to be involved in the bipartisan development of the most sweeping update to America's nuclear policy in over 40 years, the ADVANCE Act, which was signed into law this year. We're going to do our part and step up to the plate and try to move this technology. I represent Virginia. Now, I'm all the way across the state from where they have all the nuclear submarines, but we have a lot of experience in this field, and small modular reactors is something that I campaigned on. I told my folks I was for it. My only disappointment in this week's announcement by Appalachian Power, which is a subdivision of AEP, American Electric Power, when they said they're filing for a license for a small modular reactor in Campbell County, probably about 20 miles outside of my borders. I would have rather had it in my district. This is a new, clean, safe way to do things. And I think it's going to be exciting for all areas that will embrace this technology. I'm really positive about it. Now, you have to make sure you have some reasonable checks and balances in there. You've got to make sure everything is set up safe. So when they're looking at in my district, which is in the deep southwest part of my district, in southwestern Virginia, where we do coal and natural gas currently, we have an energy workforce. But every mountain is not the same. So when you're bringing in an SMR, which I have advocated, and the governor wants to go in that direction, you have to make sure, because every mountain is different. We have a lot of karst formations. We have a lot of abandoned underground mines. You have to make sure that the ground is sufficient to establish that this would be a safe place to have it. So you can't just build them in every nook and cranny, but you can build them in a lot of places and provide a lot of power cleanly and cheaply for the people, and that's what we're all about.
Awesome. And for the audience, if you're not aware, the ADVANCE Act was recently passed, and it really streamlined permitting for nuclear regulations. So we're very excited by that bill, and we thank you for your support on that. Representative James, you're a manufacturing district, so I understand in Michigan. But let's go a little. We're international, so let's go international first. A robust American nuclear industry not only benefits the United States, but helps our allies as well. How can the committee, Congress, lead to help American allies around the world in terms of nuclear?
Well, that's a really good question. In Michigan in particular, I feel like we're at ground zero for both manufacturing and for our environment. Many of you know that Michigan is surrounded by the largest area of fresh water in the entire world. And even though Michigan depends on manufacturing, specifically automotive manufacturing, we also depend on clean air and clean water to live. Right? So we recognize that we have to take a balanced approach to both economical and environmental sustainability. That's why what we're doing, recognizing the needs of not just tomorrow, but today, we need to continue to make those smart investments into clean energy technologies. Wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, and yes, making sure that we have the consistent flow of natural gas to create that glide path to that sustainable, economical, clean energy solution. Right now in the state of Michigan, we have 3 plants, and one of them, the very first reactor to be brought back online in our nation's history, is happening right in West Michigan on the Palisades, right on the border of the Lake Michigan. Well, would you be doing that if it weren't safe? With the new technologies, particularly going to the SMRs, the small modular reactors with the Gen 4 technology, this is eons more safe. It's a third of the cost. You can get up to 300 megawatts per facility, and Holtec owns it. They were initially commissioned from Florida to decommission it, and now they're going back, and we should have more sustainable base load power specifically. That will enable us to lower our energy rates, which will allow us to lower our costs of doing business, which will attract more business, more manufacturing, and doing so with zero carbon emissions out of that specific facility. Now, the government does have a role in helping this, not just in Michigan, right? Not just in the automotive area, not just the number one manufacturing district where I come from, not just the Great Lakes State. But what we can do specifically with our energy independence is rather than rely on, say, Russia for their uranium stores, we can do it ourselves. But here's the thing with business, as you all understand. The reactors aren't going to make that investment if they know that the supply isn't there. And the manufacturers aren't going to make that investment unless they know that the demand is there. And so that's why very recently the United States Congress acted, and it was signed into law in 2020. You know who was the president in 2020? Trump. Continuing to lower America's emissions, even under his administration, one of the things that he did was sign this act into law, which created an imperative for the Department of Energy Secretary to make sure that we had sustainable uranium for our own supplies, to get that independence. What we did subsequently is create a fund, additional $700 million to secure these funds. But the only problem is, and this is a catch-22, to address that catch-22, we need to create some sort of revolving line of credit so that those funds can be reinvested to continue making sure that we can lower costs by 50 to 70% to make sure that we can have vehicles and products that we can export to the world, technologies and energies that we can export to the rest of the world, and do that. That would make not just America energy independent, but our energy independence will make the rest of the world more profitable, more prosperous, and more independent. That's the type of partnership that we're looking for. Not a partnership of dependence, but a partnership of mutual respect and benefit. And so those are the types of things that we're looking at, not just from Michigan, where we have a dual imperative for economic and environmental sustainability, but also things specifically that Congress is doing to allow our energy independence to benefit the rest of the world.
Fantastic. Thank you for that perspective. It was very specific also to Michigan, but internationally too. I love it, and I appreciate the perspective here. Congressman Peters, you're from the great state of California, southern part of the California. But when I think California, beyond wine, I think technology. So I wanted to ask you a question about AI. How does nuclear energy play in the future of powering technologies like AI? We've seen some recent partnerships with companies, tech companies, and nuclear energy deals recently. So please comment.
Well, so for the first time in some decades, the United States is actually going to be increasing demand for electricity. We've been growing, but we've been more efficient, so we haven't actually needed to create more power. And now it's going to be there's going to be huge demand, partly because of the return of manufacturing. Some of that's due to the work we did with President Biden, probably because generally electrification, but also because of AI. Let me just give you an example of what we're talking about in terms of quantity. The Microsoft facility that they want to build is going to take 5 gigawatts. 5 gigawatts. What's that? Well, the facility that they just built in Georgia, the Southern companies just built Georgia, has 4 reactors. That's going to generate 4 gigawatts. All right? Fukushima was 1.2 gigawatts. One AI facility wants 5 gigawatts. And this is going to happen not just with Microsoft, but with other companies too. So we're going to have to generate a lot of power. I think that's where nuclear offers us a tremendous opportunity to provide reliable baseload, non-emitting power in a way that's really now become bipartisan. The Advance Act that Morgan referenced that President Biden signed was supported with, I think, all but 2 votes in the Senate. And the concern among the left that existed in the 70s about nukes, I think, has evaporated. People are really pragmatic about having the need for all this power and having it to be clean You can't do better than nuclear. And nuclear actually, by proof, is one of the safest ways to generate power that we know. So we're talking about reopening 3 Mile Island, and Gavin Newsom has kept open Diablo Canyon for another 5 years. So I think we see a real optimism about it. And through the work that we've done in Congress, we're going to be making investments to support it and support research. And we've done permit reform to make it go faster. I think permit reform, as you may know, is something I've been working on in general because America we just can't compete if it takes us so long to build anything. But particularly in energy, we're going to need a lot of energy soon. We want to do it right. I think nuclear is going to be a big part of that.
I want to build on the demand part, and not just with AI, but just for so many things, the quality of life that we have in the United States. I know we talked about in the press conference sharing that quality of life around the world, but it's got to start at home, right, for us. And we learned the first time you do something, it takes a bit. Second, third, fourth, fifth, it gets a little easier. So if we can scale, bring down those costs, the developing world would be, it seems to be able to adapt those technologies more quickly. But talk about the economic competitiveness of the United States and how essential energy is and how nuclear plugs into building our nuclear capacity.
Well, I don't think there's any question that we're going to need more power. It's not just AI. It's also the expected increase in electric vehicles. You name it. I'm the oldest one up here. This wasn't even thought about when I was in high school. Nobody thought that would ever happen. That was a pipe dream, something from Star Trek. And today it's a reality, but it takes a lot of power. It takes power to make it. It takes power to use it. I was plugged in on the airplane all the way over here, making sure that I had enough. And so nuclear is going to be a big part of that, along with lots of other things. But you're right. We can be the test bed for some of this, and we can then have that technology spread around the world. And sometimes they leapfrog us, as we saw with cell phones. A lot of countries, we put up the telephone lines and we had them going everywhere, and a lot of countries just skipped that step and went to the cell phone step because it made more sense for them. So hopefully we can have this. We can make sure those manufacturing jobs are there, and you're absolutely right in what you said about bringing the cost down as more people are doing it. And we can, and I got to say, part of the reason I think they probably went to Campbell County with that license request is because in Lynchburg, which borders Campbell County and my district, is BWXT, which is one of the folks who makes the nuclear reactors for the Navy. And so the technology is right there, and it makes sense. We're going to do it here. We're going to be close to the people who can make it and who know what they're doing. And we can do that, and then we can have this spread around the world. I think it's fabulous. It's good for the United States. It's good for the world, and it's good for the environment.
So Campbell County was a little bit more competitive, I guess. Is that what you're saying? Okay, well, speaking of, no knock on your district, Congressman.
I know.
I actually want to piggyback on that.
I was going to say, because manufacturing.
That's very, very important.
Yeah.
See, most of the world, particularly the West, depends on the United States for security. The United States has been a reliable ally, particularly to the West, since World War II and before. And the United States' ability to have a thriving and strong economy that is not dependent on anyone is extremely important for global stability and our nation's securities. The United States' ability to be able to mine and refine and lower costs of manufacturing in the United States directly benefits our allies and our ability to maintain our mutual defense, for us to maintain our promise to make sure that we do what we can to support world peace. We believe in peace through strength, but that doesn't start with the military. I'm a former military officer. I graduated West Point in 2004, flew Apache helicopters in combat in Iraq, and I went into the business world, and now I'm in Congress. I understand the results of failures of diplomacy, and I hate war, and we want peace. But the best way to have it is to never be beholden to those who would hurt you. And so being able to mine and refine, making sure that we secure our supply chains, making sure more of that is domestic as possible without sabotaging our way as we move toward that independence, that's very, very important. And the specific counties, that's how that happens. The individual Americans who are working each and every single day, they're not just working for American security. They're working for global peace. And that is something that's important to all of us.
Congressman, jump in here.
In our committee, sometimes we've heard people ask the rhetorical question, why should the United States be investing so much money in reducing emissions when we're only 10% of emissions? And there's really kind of two reasons. One is, let's show the rest of the world that you can have a high standard of living without relying on dirty fuels. And the second is, let's invent the stuff here so that we can have the economic benefit and the growth that comes from deploying this not just here but around the world. And nuclear is a real opportunity for us because if you think about our foreign policy, when we travel, we travel other places, and often we'll meet with country leaders who say, you know, China is investing real money here, and we don't need you to match China necessarily, but we need you to be here. Well, what about a foreign policy that emphasizes the deployment of American nuclear power as a way to keep dirty coal in the ground? Coal's not as economical as it was in the United States, but it's sure cheap in India, and the coal out there is very dirty. It's in our climate interest to keep that in the ground. It's also in our national interest to make friends with the countries who are trying to figure out ways to take their people who are in poverty to prosperity, which they deserve. Let's do it with clean energy. Let's do it with American clean energy, and that could be nuclear energy too. So it's really it is a win-win for both climate and security. Just to follow on what John was saying.
And I want to riff off of that because I agree with my Democrat colleague on most of what he just said. Because if we don't want to use, and India does have dirty coal, but if I'm the president of India, I'm going to use it because I've got hundreds of millions of people who don't currently have a steady source of electricity. And so I'm going to use it if that's all I've got. You give me an alternative using nuclear technology, modern nuclear technology, I'm going to use that instead. And that's a place where we can help the world. Right. We lead, and then we send it out to the rest of the world, and then they don't have to use their source. But if I'm the president of a country that has a fossil fuel source, even if it's not as clean as I might like it, I'm going to use it to make sure my people have a standard of living that is at least close to what the rest of the world is getting, or what I'm seeing in the movie theaters, if not on the TV.
And thinking about your districts, too, because I want to make sure you're representatives of that district. Do your constituents, do they see the benefits of investing in power, electricity, lowering costs, consumer businesses? I mean, it's a softball question, but
I feel like you're yelling at me.
No, I'm not. But don't they want this? I mean, it's not. You represent them. You're representatives.
Well, California has, as you know, taken a very aggressive approach to decarbonizing, and there is some conversation about whether we've gone too fast because prices are high. I will say, so that's a conversation we need to have. But we have the San Onofre nuclear plant just north of us in Orange County, which had a problem with its cooling system. And Southern California Edison chose not to try to relicense it because the permitting process was too hard. And I think so. People are that's one of the reasons why rates may be higher in California is because we're using something that other than what had already provided all those sunk costs that has to be paid for. But the one thing people are excited about in terms of the new technology is that new nuclear technology might generate less waste. Because we have a problem with what to do with the spent fuel that's at San Onofre right now, which is not generating electricity; it's just generating concern. So I think folks in our area of Southern California like the prospect of generating less waste through advanced nuclear technologies.
Well, Elon Musk could just shoot it up to the moon, right? It's fun.
I appreciate that. So let's go to helping other countries lean in. Where do you see the barriers, or what could be holding back countries from investing in nuclear? And how can the United States encourage others, beyond you being here and saying so, but help other countries lean in and develop nuclear energy? I'm going to open it up for whoever would like to answer that first.
Okay, so I have an idea. There's something called the Development Financial Corporation out of the United States. And this is an organization that invests private dollars into other countries for things like infrastructure, things like agriculture, things like energy, things like health and healthcare. And this is something that benefits those countries, whether it be Ghana or South Africa. South Africa actually has an outfit that provides the helium that is used. I used this joke before with Elon Musk, but actually used in the SpaceX rockets. And so not only does this help countries around the world, particularly in the global south, but it also returns 9 figures back to the American taxpayer. See, these are not gifts or giveaways. This is working specifically with entities in countries of need to address that country's needs specifically, to have a marketable resource for that region, and the American taxpayers see a return from that partnership. That is real money in the billions that is used to help to share technologies and benefits and finances for countries that would not have otherwise had the resources, while putting in last year, it was over $250 million back directly into the U.S. Treasury. And that is after paying the American taxpayer for the original appropriation. That benefits the United States, and it benefits the entities that we are partnering with. And this is in direct contrast to, say, the Belt and Road Initiative that further plunges a lot of these countries further into debt, more beholden to China. And so this is, I can't think of a better example of the United States not just wanting our own independence, we want your independence too. We want other nations to be independent and be mutually beneficial partners with us. And in a world where there is no single superpower anymore, we must be the partner of choice in making sure that we are more focused on economic development and mutual security. Those are the ways that we get there.
Appreciate that. Any other thoughts on the international piece from?
I would just say we've touched on it before. As my colleague said, we bring the cost down by getting it out there. And as my other colleague said, we got to get permitting reform. And he's been a huge advocate, so he doesn't just come here and say that. He says it in committee every time he gets a chance. Because we've got to streamline that process so that we can get those new technologies into the field faster, so that we can then share the ones that are the best with the rest of the world, and we can do it with a program that Mr.
Well,
James
you're building right on my next question, which is about permitting reform. So, Congressman Peters, I wanted to, what specifically are you saying? Everyone, buckle up.
So, we understand from Princeton research that to get 80% of the benefit of the IRA from a climate perspective, we have to triple the capacity of the grid in the next 30 years. Today, it takes 10 years to do a power line, at least. About 7 years of that is process. Since 2014, North America has built 7 gigawatts of interregional power. And so about half of that's the United States. 4, so if you say 4. South America has built 22. Europe, 44. China, 260. We can't compete at this rate. We will not make our numbers on climate. We will also not, because every year is something like a 20%, every year of delay is something like a 20% price increase. We're not doing the taxpayers any favors either, right? So this permitting has become real, and it's becoming a climate imperative too, because if you're a Democrat now, we're not like in the 70s, it was about playing defense, stopping bad ideas. Lake Erie was on fire, right? We had to stop things, right? Now it's about offense. We have to build stuff. We have to build transmission, offshore wind, solar, utility scale solar, hydrogen pipelines, direct air capture and carbon capture things. And, we're losing if we don't make it go faster. So this has been my pitch to Democrats. It has been remarkably hard because they seem to view, NEPA, for instance, as if Moses gave it to us on tablets. And it was just given to us by people like us who were doing their best with IBM Selectric typewriters to meet the problems of the day. Our environmental laws need to be modernized to meet today's challenges. I know I've got Republican partners. Ironically, I'd get more Democrats on board. But I think this is a real opportunity in the next administration, I hope. If nobody overreaches, I think we can make some real progress, and I'm looking forward to that.
I am so excited to work with you on that.
And as you could tell, I am too. And one of the pieces that I like that I've seen that you can make work, it's got to be reasonable. We'll have to figure out what that is. But a shot clock. Everybody knows we have a shot clock in basketball. You got so many seconds to take your shot. I think we need a shot clock on the regulatory agencies that if you have an objection, state it and get it stated on the record early so that we have a quicker time to turn around. If there's a legitimate objection, sure. We want to fix that, but tell us about it so that the industry, whatever industry it is, and we're talking nuclear, and that would apply there too, can come in and fix whatever that problem is or address that issue in a faster time. Too often, it's months or years before they know there is a problem.
And to our credit, the Advance Act does a lot of the work we just talked about with respect to nuclear. We've got a pretty good compromise from Manchin and Barrasso that I think will help with transmission and some other things. Bruce Westerman and I are working on general NEPA reform, but we certainly got really good progress on forests with Fix Our Forest Act, Save Our Sequoias Act. So we're making progress, and actually the CHIPS Act too. We lost the semiconductor industry to overseas. We saw the vulnerability that gave us from the pandemic, and in a bipartisan way, Senator Kelly, Senator Cruz partnered with me on getting some NEPA restrictions out of the way of building CHIPS facilities. We passed that with a 2/3 vote in the House. And so I think we're going to make progress, but people are starting to realize that it's not just about it's not just about stopping stuff, it's about making stuff happen.
Well, in our remaining time, I wanted to ask you about the end of the 118th Congress. This is what's known in the U.S. in the Congress as lame duck session. So looking at lame duck, what's remaining now that we're past the elections, and looking forward to the 119th Congress, what is possible based on, you've identified a lot of need, right, to engage as legislators. Any predictions about what can occur either in lame duck or starting, of course, in the 119th Congress?
I'm waiting for them to tell me.
and that's fair. Yeah, it's lame ducks are always frustrating because you want to get a lot of things done. Mostly what you can get done at this point are things that the groundwork has already been laid down, and they think, okay, this is our last chance to get it done this term. Particularly for those senators and members of the House that are leaving, they may want to get a particular piece of legislation through, and if 90% of it's agreed to, then you can get a compromise. Anything that's not already at a 90% basis is going to wait till next year. It's the nature of the beast, and probably 50 to 75% of those that are 90% worked out will not get done until next year. So it gets a little frustrating. We do have to get a spending bill or bills done.
Yes, you do.
But other than that, and we'll probably have to do something on the farm bill. It'll probably kick that can down the road, unfortunately. But we will get some things done, and hopefully some of them are going to surprise us all. But it's stuff that's already been worked on that most people are comfortable with, and it's just getting that last piece of the puzzle to fit in. And like I said, we'll get some of it done, but most of it will go to next year.
Any, Congressman James, anything you're hoping to get done in lame duck, or any of your priorities you wanted to share in the 119th Congress?
Well, you heard me mention the DFC reauthorization. That would be a big deal to move through. Also, not taking the eye off the ball with AGOA reauthorization and PEPFAR reauthorization. Those are things that, as my colleague mentioned, are about 95% of the way there, but we'll see if it actually happens. Those are things that that go a long, long way from a diplomatic standpoint for the United States of America. But we're excited for the 119th Congress and working together to make sure that we bring prosperity to the American people and also to the rest of the world as well through our technology and innovation.
Congressman Peters.
I'll just say there are a lot of things that are 90% that I'm working on, and the Fix Our Forests Act is one where we're really trying to let the Forest Service do its job. Particulate pollution and black carbon from forest fires are some of the worst pollutants that we have now, and it's dwarfing the contribution of the utilities in California in terms of pollution. So even though I don't have forests near me in California, I've gotten involved in that. And in the next Congress, I'm hoping for two things. One is I want to make more progress on permit reform, and I think we can do that. But the other thing is methane. What we're going to see is President Obama had methane regulations. President Trump repealed them. Biden put more regulations in. I suspect Trump will want to repeal them. We need legislation that stops this back and forth because we know the industry wants compliance. They need a system that's fair. Let's write it down as a Congress so that it doesn't go presidential to presidential, and we can agree on something that makes sense for the country, for the industry, and for the environment. I'd like to see if we can do that in the next Congress as well.
Very hopeful statements here. I think we'll call it a wrap right there, but I want to thank you all again for coming so far to share your message. It's very important. I want to thank you. I'm encouraging others to thank you as well for coming. And if the audience would just thank our panelists here, the members, for an awesome conversation. Thank you, gentlemen.
We loved having you join us at the U.S. Center. Please remember to return your headsets as you leave.